just discovered our next guest on The Informer makes the best paella that you can have. His name is Michael Ray. Michael, welcome. Now that I know that you can nail paella, when this lockdown lifts in Victoria, we're coming to your place, all right?
You're more than welcome.
Welcome again. We get a chance to shoot the breeze and talk about a whole bunch of different things. I want to talk about Father's Day. I know it means an awful lot to you. It's meant a lot to me in the past, especially I remember when my father was still alive. It's a very special opportunity each and every year to say thank you, to reflect on what our parents provide for each and every one of us. What does it mean to you?
Oh, George, it's massive. This is my 8th year as
Happy
a
anniversary.
dad. Thank you. It's great. It's a time to reflect. It's a time to realise the shoulders of my dad that I stand on, the lessons and that he passed on. But it's a massive time of change for fathers in Australia at the moment as well. So we're a lot different as men, as fathers, than what our fathers were.
And the community has changed, the expectations have changed, the language has changed, yeah? Father's Days of the past had a different flavour. I know you've done some stats and given us an idea of how our tastes have changed. What were the sorts of things that you would buy for your father growing up?
Oh, my dad, it'd be about his scotch or handcrafted things.
When you were younger though, not when you, in the days when you could actually walk into a liquor store because you were legally, you were of the legal age, but younger, what were the sort of things you got for Dad?
Oh, a lot of handmade stuff, George, a lot of the pottery, the arts and crafts type things, but you know, the old Fitzroy Football Club scarf. He was a mad Fitzroy supporter back before the Brisbane Bears stole them.
I made Dad, what do you call it? I went to the metal workshop in the school and we made openers for Dad, for our dads. Open beer bottles, open soft drink bottles, you know, creative stuff.
Yeah.
Did you ever put a hand into that sort of side of the your schoolwork and make sure you took something positive home for Dad?
Yes, all the time, George. The schools are great at supporting kids and their Father's Days and things like that, but it's funny, a lot of it was the handicraft, the tool type things so that we could build something
Correct.
with Dad. But it's funny, I always think that your hardware or your yard equipment, should really be considered the mum equivalent of a kitchen appliance, but it doesn't have the same stigma to it. So. And
now, of course, we've seen man caves, the arrival of the man cave. They weren't man caves when I was growing up. They were the workshop or the garage or a couple of chests. My father had 10 boxes of metric tools. I was trying to think of the word metric. Because when he arrived in Australia in 1949, we had imperial measure. We didn't have any metric tools. And Dad was an automotive engineer. He was also a problem solver. And he ended up seeing an opportunity to work on the Snow Mountain scheme. And his expertise in repairing those big trucks, the big Pantechnicons that so few had experience to work on. Dad, of course, had learnt much of that during the war. Greece, where my father was born, there were two occupations. The Italians went in first, then the Germans. And of course, learning the craft, you better make sure that you repair the Italian tank or the German artillery vehicles, or you're in trouble. And he became enormously proficient and capable. And imagine, armed with those skills, he came down under, a world away, to start another career and find sanctuary for what he hoped would be a young family. Yeah. So imagine that journey. Your father, was it a similar journey?
Oh, very similar, George. And talk about small world and coincidence. My dad also worked on the Snowy River.
Get out.
He came back from the war as able to operate heavy equipment as a former tank driver.
Oh. So we're talking the Korean War?
Yeah, Korean War.
Wow.
And he told me the story of driving the dozers down off the mountain each night because they would freeze, so they had to come down to a certain level, and having a crazy Austrian bloke paying him cash money
Cash.
to put in some ski runs to bulldoze a lot of the trees. And him and his workmates used to make money on the side, and they thought he was crazy because there were no ski fields in Australia at that time. So,
Wow.
very
We are
similar.
talking about a very different Australia, aren't we?
Yeah.
One of the things I discovered in one of our earlier discussions about your father, the war for him was an opportunity to cut the umbilical cord, to leave the family, and to grow, to mature. And he came back a different guy. We don't get that necessarily, that opportunity today. But for me, I can remember the best example I can give is when I had to leave Sydney to get a career in broadcasting. Because in those days, for a young ethnic boy, to get a plum job on radio, you had to go and earn your stripes in the country. And for me, the country happened to be Cairns in far north Queensland. And cutting that umbilical cord was not easy, but you had to do it. Did you find the same sort of thing? That when you got a chance to cut the umbilical cord, it helped you make that leap and have to be responsible, truly responsible for your own dealings in a manner that you hadn't had to worry about in the past?
Yeah, definitely, George. I think as men, I think nearly every culture has a rite of passage where you have to do something to become a man, whereas women mature and become a woman automatically, whereas men have to go out and slay an animal or
a dragon.
there's some rites of passage to become a man.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens when we cut that umbilical cord. But it was always with my dad, like supported me 100%. Good, go off and do it, and then come here, son. If you need anything, just call. There's a bit of money.
Was our emotional connection with our parents the same as it is today?
I think it was. I never doubted my father's love or connection. It wasn't as expressed. It just wasn't what we as men did, and it counterproductive. But I think that it only matters if you questioned it. And I was so secure in my father's devotion and love and all the rest of it. It didn't need to be said. But I'm so much the opposite with my daughter, and I'd like to think I would be if she was a son as well. So
why do you think that is? Why have we changed and we're more expressive? Is it because we've watched more of the world?
I'd say we've just become realising that it actually is counterproductive. I think once you lose somebody close to you, maybe that if you're wondering how they felt, and there's a few studies that show that the love felt by the parent isn't necessarily felt by the child. So one of the things I say all the time, like, say it, show it, express it as much as you can, don't leave it to doubt. So
that's a good point. We see more and more and more families, children, parents, seeking out counsellors to help them through that. Are you seeing more and more of that in your dealings and your daily work in the different fields that you're involved in?
I think what we find with a lot of dads is dads suffer from immense guilt because we're being pulled in two different directions. When we surveyed, there's only 16% of dads in a recent survey that said that they felt that their work and their home life were in balance, and there's that constant conflict of thinking they need to be the provider and realising they're missing out on their children. So there's that, we hear about mum guilt a lot, but it's live and it's serious for dads.
You touch on something. This is a very awkward time in our history. We're going through a COVID pandemic, as we all know. A great many dads are not working. Yeah? And for the very first time, they're going to experience a Father's Day where they're spending an awful lot more time at home, probably feeling a little insecure. What would you say to them?
We're all in the same boat. We mightn't be in the same boat, but we're all in the same ocean. There's a fantastic organisation that I would urge any dads to reach out for called Suit Tie Stroller that Blake Woodard runs.
Yep.
He just released a COVID survey, and I'll just go through some of the figures. 85% of the surveyed dads who live with their kids experience a closer bond during COVID, so that extra time. 74% of dads not living with the kids also experienced a closer bond during COVID. So there's a bit of silver lining for it. Only 3% of the respondents to the survey actually wanted things to go back to normal.
Uh-huh.
And 84% were willing to take that step a bit further and actually consider changing jobs should it go back
because
to the
they've
way
actually
it
fallen
was.
in love with the extra time they have
Extra
to
time.
nourish not only the children, but for the children to nourish them.
Yep, they all want to embrace the flexible working, the ones that still are working, but it's a massive time of stress for dads who are tasked and find identity with being the outdated breadwinner
Yep.
in society and feeling like they're falling down and where it lays on their shoulders. But the problem existed before the pandemic, and it's just been exposed and exacerbated by it, where dads felt like they had to live up to this model. And it's where the equality debate now is, this is
Serious
highlighted.
questions. Yeah.
Guess what? A more diverse, inclusive economy where everyone is involved and valued at the same rate is going to help it recover a lot quicker too. Whereas if it's mainly men and the male-orientated jobs, construction and all the rest of those, it's going to take a lot longer. So now is a chance for women's employment and contribution to be even more greatly appreciated and enforced.
Now, you went through a list of some of those surveys that you've picked up on. Give us a sense of how our tastes have changed over the years. When people, maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, would go in and shop for their dad, and what were the sorts of things they were chasing then, and what are the sorts of things they're chasing now?
I went through the Google Analytics.
Oh, that's the ultimate search tool.
Yep.
Go on.
And
Just don't tell Google. All right.
yeah, and funny that now we've found the average age of the Australian male is 33. But modern day dads are more likely to be able to bake a cake than help a kid build a billy cart.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Or a paella dish for their family. Yeah.
King of the paella, George, I'm telling you. It's some interesting facts first. 20% of the Australian population are dads now, roughly 4.6 million. Almost half of those, so around 2.2 million, have children under the age of 18, so young dads.
Right.
1 in 5 single-parent households are now dads. I'm one of them. Single mother and single father households are increasing at 9% and 14% every 5 years. So eventually...
They're big numbers.
Yeah, eventually single dads will be in the majority and the old outdated trope of a single mum will be in the minority. Women are graduating with more degrees, they're more suited for the modern workplace. So the world really is changing, and at the moment there's that foot in each camp where I want to spend more time with my kids, it's expected of me to be more present for my kids, but I also still earn more. So I'm locked into that. The family needs the money. 2 weeks available at minimum pay for the dad. Mm-hmm. Just, it's not that dads don't want to be involved for money. It's a financial decision for most families. If dad's earning 120 and mum's earning 40, it's very hard for dad to step out.
Correct.
And mum, so it just keeps reinforcing it. But back to the Google things. 5 years ago,
go on.
the most popular, most searched item was GPS. 2013, GPS. So before...
So 7 years ago, you needed your TomTom or you're in trouble.
Yep.
Because reading the book and driving a car, never a safe thing to do.
No, street smart, not that smart to be looking at the street.
Right, okay.
5
years ago?
2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago.
Soccer rose up to the top. So I'm not sure if it's to do with the Matildas and dads, their daughters getting interested in soccer and wanting to go out. But
well, the World Cup was last year. The Matildas have been on the rise. They've been in the minds of parents. In fact, I took a workmate of mine and we went to cover one of the Matildas matches at Amy Park in Melbourne, and the numbers of children, boys and girls, watching the women play was huge, and there were a host of fathers there with their daughters and their sons, which again lifted me as a sporting fan and also as a father. I got an extra dollop of enjoyment watching all of this going on.
Great. Well, this year it seems that hardware supplies, some of the car accessories, but the biggest one is socks and jocks, and there's a huge conversion chart. So a lot of shoes coming in, they're converting US sizes to Australian sizes. So socks, jocks and shoes this year, and hardware for dads.
So you've been told, Michael Ray has given you the best indicator yet for Father's Day 2020. It's socks, jocks,
shoes, hardware.
And hardware.
And can I just give a shout out?
Click and collect at Bunnings, by the way, in Melbourne.
Shout out for dads who are going through things. Mums groups and mum support, we're all the rage now. Now with dads taking up more of the things, there's a couple of great organisations that I've mentioned. Blake Woodard's Suit Tie Stroller for dads, a fantastic community. The Fatherhood guys, Andrew McCutcheon does a great book.
Tremendous work.
Rob Sturrock, Man Raises Boy, fantastic book. And there's also the Fathering Project as well. You can find them all online, and they are just such a great resource for dads and such a great community, because don't want to be like me and make every mistake when you can listen to someone else's and learn from them before you make them.
Michael Ray, as always, thank you for making sense, mate.
Thanks so much, George.